right, good to see you this Sunday evening. Thank you so much for being here, being part of our parking lot drive-in service, or wherever you are, joining us via the internet. We're glad that we're able to meet together again. Look forward to next week being inside the church. These fellas are going around. They have some new song sheets. They're different songs from what we had on this morning. So make sure you get one of those. Anybody that didn't get one of those, anybody that didn't get a new song sheet from this evening, okay, we'll make sure those are covered. Daniel, if you would, go ahead and just block that street off. That way nobody comes in. Let's get started pretty good. We had some folks trying to drive through here this morning, and we could have blocked them in. We had a captive audience. I don't know how well that would have worked. Glad to see you here tonight. Let's begin with some singing. And Anthony, you'll come and let's sing together.
All right. When we all get to heaven, sing the first, the second, and the last. On the first. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing His mercy and His grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, He'll prepare for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. On the second. While we walk the pilgrim's pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sigh. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Onward to the prize before us, to His beauty we'll behold. Soon the pearly gates will open, we shall tread the streets of gold. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Right across the page, number 55, where the roll is called up yonder. On the first. When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, the time shall be no more, and the glory reigns eternal, bright and fair. When the saints of earth shall gather over on the other shore, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, 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 I'll be there. On the second. On that bright and cloudless morning, when the dead in Christ shall rise, and the glory of His resurrection share. When His chosen ones shall gather to their home beyond the skies, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, 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 I'll be there. On the last. Let us labor for the Master from the dawn's setting sun. Let us talk of all His wondrous love and care. Then when all of life is over and our work on earth is done, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, 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 I'll be there.
All right, thank you, Anthony, for that. I'm going to pray, but I want to mention just a couple of things. On Wednesday night, a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that we had some missionaries that were greatly extended in ministering. Talked to one family this week, family down in Mexico, and they are going every day, buying food, taking it to church folks, because they literally, the only thing they have in the house is what the preacher's bringing them. They're not able to work, and those folks live from day to day. So anyway, we talked about that. I challenged some folks on a Wednesday night, and we sent some extra funds from our church. Well, there's some folks that listened in on that. There's another church. Their pastor actually was listening to us on that night, and there's another church that sent us $1,000 toward that. Another individual sent us $1,000 more toward that. Another individual has given another $250 toward that. Another individual has given another $300 toward that. So the Bible talks. The verse that I use over in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, talking about your zeal provoking many. So you give, and that encourages others to give. And we praise the Lord for that, and want to even do more. These folks are extended. Look, we've got it good. Folks, we've got it good. We have so much. We live in a land of plenty. And I mean, there were days at the beginning where there were a few things you might not have been able to find at the grocery store, but we've never gone and come home empty. We have so much food. We have so much supply. We have so much to be grateful for. And we ought to just thank the Lord. We ought to just thank Him for His goodness to us, for His mercy and His grace, how He's provided sufficiently, abundantly for us. And it's good to live in the country that we live in. It's not a perfect place. We know that. It's not a perfect place. If it was a perfect place, we'd ruin it. Amen? Amen. God created a perfect place one time, and man ruined it, didn't He? That's how it goes with mankind. But it's a good country. I'm so glad to be here. Glad to be right here. And it's good to know the Lord, have the freedom and the liberty that we do have. Be grateful for what you do have. Be thankful for what you do have. And it's easy to look and think about, well, we can't do this, we can't do that. We've got all these restrictions on us. You ought to be grateful for what you do have. Thank God for the privilege to know Him. Have a Bible in your hand. Have a church to meet at. To have some extra funds to give and to be able to meet the needs of others. There are folks all around the world that would swap places with you in a heartbeat. They'd swap places with you for your circumstances, whatever they may be. They would swap places with you. And I look at what's going on around us, and I see the world just fulfilling Scripture. You look and you think, how in the world could we become a cashless society? And yet this last week I was in some places and they said no cash accepted, credit cards only. They wouldn't take any cash inside. They wouldn't allow anything to come in. And so it just takes a virus. That's how we become a cashless society. You look at our country and all the churches that we have, and you say, how does America become a churchless society? A virus. Something as small as a virus. And when you look at Scripture and you see the last days and you wonder, well, how could that ever be? It will be. It will be. And we're nearing the end. We're nearing the end. And it's good to know the Lord in these days. Yet there's so many that do not. There's so many that do not. We've had some friends. We've had some friends right here in this community watching our services, and we're so grateful that you're here. Thank you for being a part of the services. We hope you'll come and join us in our services when we're able to meet back inside the building on the property here. We hope you'll come and join us. And I want to tell you about Jesus. I want to sit down with you, tell you how you can know you're born again, that you're on your way to heaven. Well, that's the most important thing, is knowing the Lord. And I'm looking forward to that beyond these days. Folks are still getting saved. God's still working. He still wants to save. And let's stay faithful. Stay faithful in your witness, and stay faithful in telling others of Jesus Christ. Let's pray. Father, we need your help and strength in this evening. We ask that you give us your power. Thank you for your word. Help us, God, as we would deliver these thoughts you've laid upon our heart for this service. Thank you for these that are gathered here. Thank you for those that are watching from home. Lord, we pray that you would speak to us and help us. It's just not the same these days meeting as we are, but we're grateful for this opportunity. We ask your blessings upon it. Lord, we'll sing another song. We desire to lift up your name and your cause, and even, Lord, the fact that we're here outside and folks are driving by and stopping at the stop signs and they can hear us in the neighborhood. I pray that souls would be pointed to Jesus Christ. Lord, you are our hope. You are our refuge. You are our strength. You are our safety. You are our liberty. We look to you as we spoke of this morning. God, we look to you in these days. Lord, may our hearts be right with thee. God, you challenge us. You convict us tonight by your word. And Lord, you change us as we yield ourselves to you. Speak to us and help us in the remainder of this service. For your honor and glory, we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, we'll sing one other song, then we'll have the message. Anthony, you come.
Number 246 on the backside of your sheet, redeemed, redeemed. How I love to proclaim it. The first, the second, and the fourth. Redeemed, how I love to proclaim it. Redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed through his infinite mercy. His child and forever I am. Redeemed, redeemed. Redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed, redeemed. His child and forever I am. On the second. Redeemed and so happy in Jesus. No language my rapture can tell. I know that the light of his presence with me doth continually dwell. Redeemed, redeemed. Redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed, redeemed. His child and forever I am. On the last. I know I shall see in his beauty the King in whose law I delight, whose lovingly guardeth my footsteps and giveth me sleep in the night. Redeemed, redeemed, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed, redeemed, his child and forever I am.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Tricia. Okay, we'll go to the book of 2 Chronicles tonight, 2 Chronicles, and chapter number 7. 2 Chronicles, chapter number 7. 2 Chronicles, chapter number 7. These are familiar verses of Scripture, and we will look at them in a little different way this morning. I preached on the need of a nation, and what our nation needs for God's people to turn back to Him. Amen. 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 And tonight I want to preach something that's kind of along the same lines, and it'll be a little different, but it'll be along the same lines. And I want to preach on the burden of a land. The burden of a land. We'll be in 2 Chronicles, and chapter number 7. Some very familiar verses for us. 2 Chronicles, chapter number 7, verse 14. 2 Chronicles, chapter 7, verse 14. This is God speaking to Solomon. And this is what the Lord says. He says, read verse 13, if I shut up heaven that there be no rain, or if I command the locust to devour the land, if I send pestilence among my people, then the Lord makes the promise, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin. Notice this, and what does he promise? And I will heal their land. I will heal their land. Look then, if you would, in verse number 19. But if you turn away and forsake my commandments, my statutes and my commandments which I've set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will pluck them up by the roots out of my land, which I have given them. And then verse 21, and this house which is high shall be an astonishment to everyone that passeth by it, so that he shall say, why hath the Lord done thus unto this land and unto this house? Over and over in chapter number 6, and we'll make some other references in chapter 6 here during the message, God speaks to Solomon. Solomon speaks to the Lord about the land. When we read about the land, we speak of the crops. We speak of the commerce. It was the ground that cried out when blood had been shed in Genesis chapter 4, that God found fault with the brother who had shed the brother's blood, and the blood was crying out from the ground. God is concerned about the land, the geographical location, the properties that he had given his people. When men came west, they came in search of land of freedom and land of liberty and land of habitation. But God is concerned with specific places at specific times. God is concerned with locations and regions and geography. Many of God's promises in his word involve a land. When we go back and we read that God called Abraham, and he called him to go out unto a place which he should afterward give him for an inheritance. And Abraham was called to go out unto a land, is what the Bible tells us in Genesis 12:1. When Abraham arrived at that land, God said, "This is the land." The Lord appeared unto Abraham, and he said, "Unto thy seed will I give this land." So it was a land, it was a place that God had promised to Abraham and to the children of Israel. When they arrived at the promised land, then God said, "This is the place." And the Bible tells us that Abraham dwelled in the land of Canaan, chapter 13, verse number 1, verse 12. Then chapter 13 and verse 12, Genesis, this is what God said. He said, "For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth." So God promises posterity to Abraham. God says, "I'll give you children, I'll give you seed." And God had given him a place. God had given them a place to dwell. God had given them a place where he would bless them and where he would meet them. Blessing is associated with this place. It's not in my notes, but I'll say this. I'm glad to be right here in this place. Though we're sitting out here on the parking lot, I'm glad for this place. God has done wonderful things in this place. God has given us this place, a place where he speaks to us, a place where we gather together, a place where he can put his blessings upon our life. Abraham was told by God to look and see. God said, "Arise and walk through the land that I have promised to you." God's blessings to Abraham and his posterity were always attached to a land, a place of inheritance. It's still the land of the Jews. There's great controversy over the land today. And there's other people that are inhabiting that land as trespassers. God has given that land to the Jewish people. It'll be in their full possession again someday soon. This land that God had given to the Jews, he told them, he said, "You're never to sell it." They were there just as they're not just squatters, but it never belonged to them. It belonged to God. He told them that in Leviticus 23. He said, "The land shall not be sold forever." Leviticus 25:23. He said, "The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine. For ye are strangers and sojourners with me." The land belonged to God. When we look at the possessions of God in Leviticus 25, he told him, he said, "You belong to me, the people." God's possession, the people. "You belong to me. The land belongs to me. The tithe belongs to me." All of those things are God's possessions in Leviticus chapter 25 and Leviticus chapter number 27. What God did is he granted possession of the land to his people. In 1 Chronicles 16:18, God said this, "Unto thee will I give the land of Canaan, the lot of your inheritance." So what God does is God has a place prepared for a people that he calls, and he prepares them to enter and then to possess that land. God allows the land to be subdued before him and before the people. When the children of Israel come to the land of Canaan, there are houses that are built already. There are vineyards that are planted already. There are walls. It's divided up. It's petitioned off. All they have to do is come in and possess it. God had promised that if they would believe him and follow him, that he would drive out the enemy before him. And so God does. We see Joshua and Caleb. They come into the land, and through faith, God delivers it into their hand. Though through miraculous ways, through ways that only God could do, he provided a place for them to dwell. God made a place for them. God allowed the land to be subdued before him and the people of Israel under the rule of David. God told David, he said, "I have allowed the land to be subdued." David's son Solomon comes to the throne. He ascends the throne and he builds the temple unto the Lord. And in Solomon's prayer of dedication, Solomon has built this temple. David had helped prepare. Solomon builds this temple. He is going to pray and he is going to dedicate this unto the Lord. This is what we find in 2 Chronicles chapter number 6. He has a message, Solomon does, and he has a prayer. He prays to God. When we read 2 Chronicles 7, when God says, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray, this is in response to a prayer that Solomon has prayed to him. Solomon has said, okay, God, concerning this land, look back in 2 Chronicles chapter 6. 2 Chronicles chapter 6. In this prayer of dedication, Solomon rehearses many things about the land. About the land. This is in verse 24. Verse 24. Solomon asked God. He said, if thy people Israel be put to worse before the enemy, because they have sinned against thee, and shall return and confess thy name, and pray and make supplication before thee in this house, then hear thou from heaven, the heavens, and forgive the sin of thy people Israel. Watch this, and bring them again, where? Unto the land. So Solomon in his prayer to God, he says, God, if we sin against you and you allow an enemy to come in and to overrun us, if your people will confess, if your people will pray, if your people will supplicate, then God, will you hear and will you forgive us and will you bring us again into the land? If there's an enemy comes because of our sin. Watch next, verse 26. When the heaven is shut up, and there is no rain, because they have sinned against thee. Yet if they pray toward this place and confess thy name and turn from their sin when thou dost afflict them, then hear thou from heaven and forgive the sin of thy servants and of thy people Israel, when thou hast taught them the good way wherein they should walk. Watch this, and send rain where? Upon the land. So Solomon is praying to God, and he says, God, if because of our sin the enemy comes and overtakes us and oppresses us, if we confess our sin, would you bring us back to the land? God, if we have sinned and you bring a drought upon us, if we'll come and we'll confess our sin, if we'll seek your face, would you send rain upon the land? Upon the land. Let's read on, verse 28. 2 Chronicles 6. And if there be dearth in the land, if there be pestilence, if there be blasting or mildew, locust or caterpillars, if their enemies besiege them in the cities of their land, verse 29, then what prayer or what supplication soever shall be made of any man, verse 30, then hear thou from heaven thy dwelling place and forgive, verse 31, that they may fear thee to walk in thy ways so long as they live where? In the land. You see how many times this thing is mentioned here. God, if we have sinned and our land is broken because of our sin, God, if we have sinned and the enemy comes and drives us from our land, God, if we have sinned and a drought comes and our land is thirsty, God, if we have sinned and there be a dearth or a pestilence or something comes against our land, I look at America tonight and I see these things going on. We're living in great days of difficulty in our land. And Solomon says, God, if all these things are taking place in our land, if your people, if they will humble themselves before you, and if they'll seek your face, and if they will pray, as I talked about this morning, we need to stop pointing fingers at everyone out there. We need to check our own life. God, what is it in my life that has brought the circumstances that's going on here today? What is it in my own heart? What is it in my own life? Solomon says, dear God, if your people will pray, then will you hear from heaven your dwelling place, and will you forgive them? God, will you send rain upon the land? Will you restore the land? Will you remove the pestilence from the land? So that's Solomon's prayer. That's Solomon's heart in 2 Chronicles 6. He is dedicating this temple. Chapter 7, verse 1, now when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. Verses 1 through 3 of chapter 7, God hears Solomon's prayer, and God answers with fire, and God answers with his presence, God answers with glory. The people rejoice. The people sacrifice. Solomon goes home and goes to bed. Late in the night, God comes and speaks to him. Verse 12, chapter 7, and the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said, I have heard thy prayer. I have heard thy prayer, and have chosen this place to myself for an house of prayer. And then the verses we began with. If I have shut up heaven that there be no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people. See, is this something that could have been sent by God? Absolutely. To test our faith, to test our belief. I don't understand how all of this works. I wouldn't dare try to blame anything on God, but I'm telling you, our God is almighty. Our God can hold things back, and our God can allow things to put us in trials and tests. He can try us. He can test us. He can prove us. So here are these people that God allows drought to come upon. He allows locusts to come upon. He allows pestilence to come upon them. And then he says, if my people which are called by my name. He says this. God says to Solomon, he says, I have heard thy prayer. I have heard thy prayer. Solomon prays, and God says, I have heard thy prayer. God's inclination is to hear our prayer. And God goes on to say, he said, I have chosen this place. Look, I said earlier before preaching, I'm glad for this country. I'm glad that God has put his hand upon this country. There have been thousands upon thousands of missionaries that have gone around the world, that have put the gospel in foreign lands. There's still thousands that are there today that have gone out of this country. And for all of her problems, we still have the hand of God upon us in many ways. God said, I've chosen this place, and I'm not preaching replacement theology. I don't think the church has replaced the Jew. Don't misunderstand me. I'm just making some practical applications to us tonight that God has heard. That's God's inclination and God's intent. He said, I've chosen this place to myself. But in verse 13, we see God's indignation. He said, if I shut the heavens up, that there be a drought. Or if I send locusts. We've not had locusts. If you haven't had your head in the sand and you've read anything about the continent of Africa in the last couple of months, there is a plague of locusts there. People are looking back to the Bible for that. There is in other lands, literally. It's going on today. And then he said, where if I send pestilence among my people, this is God's indignation. God says, if my people, that's us. I can't preach to other people because they're not here, but I can preach to us. If my people, that's us. If we'll hear what God is saying to us, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face. Humility is expected. Shall humble themselves. If we'll seek his face. If we would honor God and God would be exalted in our hearts and in our lives, we love him with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our might, that he would be first and foremost. He said if they will turn from their wicked ways, holiness experience, then we would have God's intervention. God said, if my people shall humble themselves, if my people shall pray, if my people shall seek my face, if my people shall turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven. We can't expect the world to get a hold of God. It's up to us to get a hold of God. We can't expect the world to live holy and live humbly before the Lord. It's up to his people to humble ourselves before him. If we'll do so, God makes a promise. He said, then will I hear from heaven. Then will I forgive their sin. Then will I heal their what? Then will I heal their land. land. This is the habitation affected. This is the commerce. This is the crops. This is the geographical locations. This is the difficulties, the pestilence, the troubles that are come upon the land. God said, if my people will humble themselves and pray, then I'll hear from heaven and I'll forgive your sin and I'll heal your land. What we need today is some of God's people to humble themselves before Him, to get on their face before Him and say, God, it's not my brother, it's not my mother, it's not my father, it's me. Lord, I need to confess my sin. I need to repent of my unholiness and unrighteousness. God said, I'll hear and I'll forgive and I'll heal your land. I'm talking about the burden of a land, the burden of a land. The land is relieved of its burden because of the prayers of God's people. This is what we see in quarantine. We see much finger pointing in quarantine. We see much blame gaming in quarantine. We see much excuse making in quarantine. We see much opinionating in quarantine. We see much fear and panicking in quarantine. We see much accusations in quarantine. We see a lot of folks that are weak-kneed and won't accept the blame. It's everybody else's fault except mine. It's easy to get on Facebook and put the blame on somebody else. It's easy to get on social media and find somebody that agrees with you and put it on somebody else. But God said, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray. The people of God would humble themselves before Him. I wonder how much God's people have been supplicating. I challenge you way back in the beginning, weeks ago. Take time every day, spend time in prayer. Spend time in the Word of God. How much time in prayer versus news channeling? How much time in prayer versus conspiracy theory? How much time in prayer versus social media? How much time in prayer versus the endless opinionating? Look, the news media is not going to change this country. All they're going to do is stir up fear and panic and rage. That's what the news media is not going to change this country. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray. Social media platforms are not going to change this country. They'll only undermine your peace of mind. They'll chip away at your stability, leave you lost in this land. Well, I wonder who likes this or I wonder who doesn't. It really doesn't matter what man thinks about it. It really matters what God thinks about it. If my people, the prayer closet, I thought about the prayer closet. If God's people would get back in the prayer closet, the prayer closet would clothe one with humility. The prayer closet would robe one with requests to God. The prayer closet would array one with God's presence. The prayer closet would outfit one with repentance. What a garment to wear. The garment of repentance. The prayer closet would attire one with answers from heaven. The prayer closet would fit one out with forgiveness. The prayer closet would dress our land with healing. The land that we live in. The land that we live in is already cursed from the fall. God told Adam, He said, cursed is the ground for thy sake. It's man's fault, the curse. Still man's fault. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. We know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. Romans chapter 8 and verse number 22. The land is crying out. The land is crying out. The ground is crying out. The land is cursed from the fall. The pestilence, the plagues, the scourges, the droughts, the sieges that come not because of the sin of the world. They come because of the sin of God's people. Stop blaming the world and the flesh and the devil. Stop accusing the Republicans and the Democrats and socialism. Every other reason except this right here. If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. But if we confess our sin, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sin and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. I'm not just trying to put you down today. Look, I know life has been tough the last 8 weeks. I understand that. I'm tired of being in the house just like you're tired of being in the house. We're tired of being controlled and told what to do. I understand that. But in these days, I wonder how much we talk to God. I wonder how much God has had a hold of our heart, how much our life has been affected for whole. God has given us a reason to be separated. We can't find a lot of reason for separation in godliness and holiness. God has forced some separation in your life. He said, you won't remove yourself from the world, I'll remove you from the world. And I wonder how near to God his people have come. If God's people would pray, what could happen to the land? If God's people would pray, what could happen to the land? I'll read a verse I read this morning from Isaiah chapter 1. This is what God said in Isaiah 1. Wash you, make you clean, put away the evil of your doings. That's the cleansing. Learn to do well, seek judgment. That's the cleaving we talked about this morning. Come now, let us reason together. That's the coming to him. And the next verse I didn't read, I saved it for tonight. Isaiah 1:18 says this, if ye be willing and obedient, ye shall eat the good of the, guess what that next word is? Ye shall eat the good of the land. The good of the land. The burden of a land. The burden of a land is this, that God's people could live with open, willful, and unconfessed sin. That God's people could point their finger everywhere except itself. And that God's people would fail in the prayer closet. God's inclination is this, to hear our prayer. God's indignation is upon this, the sin of his people. But if we would humble ourselves before him and pray and seek his face and turn from our wicked ways, then he said, I will hear and I will forgive and I will heal their land. There's a whole lot of opinionating going on today about what's in the world. I'm telling you what we need. We need to get back to the prayer closet. I'm talking about us. Us right here. Us right here. We need to get back into the prayer closet and humble ourselves before God and ask God for healing in our land. I'm burdened for other countries. I'm sorry for what some of our missionaries are having to go through, what it's costing them, how it's hurting them. I'm burdened for those places. But I'll tell you what, I'm burdened for this place right here. I'm burdened for right here. I'm burdened for right here in Campbell. That God would heal our land. That God would heal our land. It's not on the world. It's not on the flesh. It's not on the devil. It's on us right here in our heart, that we would humble ourselves before him. And if we could leave this service with one thing, if we could leave this service with a burden, I'm talking about the burden of the land. The burden of the land. Not your political cause, not your conspiracy theories, not any kind of personal agenda, but I'm talking about a burden for the land. There's people on that street, there's people on this street, there's people on that street, people that could hear me right now that do not know the Lord, that we would be burdened for them, that we'd be burdened for them. They're hurting, they're broken, they're searching, they're looking. Oh, that God would use these days to get a hold of our land, that God would use these days to get a hold of our hearts, that we can leave this service with a burden for our nation, not in a financial sense, not in a governmental overreach sense, and I agree with some of that. Look, I don't like being told what to do any more than anybody else does. But that's not that shouldn't be the great cause that we are cleaving to today. The great thing that God's people should be doing should be humbling themselves before him, praying for God to do a work in our land. Not just simply in a sense of pity, not just simply in some kind of emotional experience, but in a spiritual sense, that America could turn back to God. Would to God that America would turn back to him. How's that going to take place? It's going to take place when we turn back to him. When we humble ourselves. I wonder how many of us spend any time in prayer this afternoon. I challenge you this morning. Go home and find a place of prayer this afternoon. Pray for the service tonight. I wonder how many of us did. I know these are familiar verses, but I want to look at it from the thought of the land. God said if we'll humble ourselves and pray and seek his face, He'll heal our land. If we'll turn to Him, He'll heal our land. But if we turn away and forsake His statutes and His commandments, He says, then will I pluck them up by the roots out of my land which I have given them. And the world will say, why has God done this? Can I tell you what happened to the Jews? God gave them a land. They turned from Him and they rebelled from Him. And they followed idols. They found themselves scattered among the nations. They found that land in rubbish and decay and overcome by the enemy. I would hate for a generation from now for this building right here to be rubbish and decay, overcome by the enemy, because God's people of this generation would not humble themselves and pray and seek His face. God, give us a burden. God, give us a burden. Am I my brother's keeper? The question was asked to God. God looked at the ground and He said, the blood of your brother is crying out. It's our responsibility. Will we take it serious? Will we take it personal? That we get right with God. And if we get right with God, then God would send healing. Is our God able to send healing in our land? Is our God able? Is our God able to send healing in our land? Is our God able? Our God is able. God says, I'm waiting on you. I'm waiting on you. If you'll humble yourselves, pray. If you'll seek my face, I'll hear and I'll forgive you. Thank God for the forgiveness. He says, and I'll heal your land. God, give us the burden of the land. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the opportunity to challenge your people. Lord, our heart has been heavy today with these thoughts, the need of a nation, the burden of a land. Kind of the same thing for the morning and the evening. God, that we'd be burdened to pray, that our hearts would be broken over what's going on in our nation. I pray, Lord, for our leaders. I pray, Lord, you give them wisdom, direction, discretion. I pray for those that know you, those that are children of God, that you've put in high places, given doors of opportunity like you gave to Joseph, like you gave to Daniel in the Old Testament. You've given them favor. I pray for their light, that it would shine bright. I pray for their insight and their wisdom from the Word of God, that you would work in and through their lives. We know, Lord, that all of this is in your control. God, we thank you for our country. Lord, we still want to send missions. Still want to send missions money and missionaries out. We still want the light of the gospel to shine bright. And yet it seems so dim in these days. God, burden our hearts. Burden our hearts for our city. Burden our hearts for our state. For this region right here. Lord, that we'd be burdened for right here. For home. God, you do a work in our life. And through us, you do a work in this community. We know you're willing. We know you're able. God, if we'd humble ourselves before you, oh, what a work you could do. What a work you would do. So, Lord, you burden us tonight. May we leave here with a deep burden upon our heart, a burden to pray, a burden to be right with you. We thank you, Father, for the opportunity to live in these days, to minister in these days. God, help us to be an encouragement to someone, to point someone to Jesus Christ. What power there is in the gospel. What change there is in knowing Jesus Christ in a personal way. Father, if there's one listening this evening does not know you, may they call upon Jesus Christ. May they trust him, calling upon him, trusting nothing else, believing him for that eternal life that only comes in knowing the Son. Father, in this week, may we pray. May we confess. May we repent. May we turn to you. May we humble ourselves before you. God, you do your work of righteousness in our heart. We love you. Love our church. Thank you for this place, this property that you've given us. Lord, we know it all belongs to you. We're just stewards of this, stewards of your time. What finances you provided for us, it belongs to you. Help us, God, to be good stewards. Lord, you work in and through our lives and help us to be a witness. May we be right with you, and God, may you send healing. May you send healing in our land. Lord, we'll look back one day and we'll say, wow, do you remember when we humbled ourselves and prayed and what God did? What God did. We're a sinful nation. Lord, there's the blood of millions of babies that cries out to you. There's evil abounds, unrighteousness. Many people could care less about you. Lord, I see people in the Bible burdened for their nation. They pray and confess the sins of the nation. Well, we confess, Lord, that our nation has turned her back on you. God, it is our desire to turn to you again, to trust you, to love you, to live for you. Father, help us as a people, just a remnant right here. God, help us to be right. God, you work in our lives and through our lives to make a change. Do what you would desire to do in these days, that souls would be pointed to Jesus Christ. We love you and thank you for love to us. Thank you for this book. Help us to live by it. May it guide our every life and principle. May it guide our convictions and our actions. May you be pleased when you look right here at Calvary Baptist Church in Campbell, Missouri. Oh God, convict us where we've sinned. Put your finger on something in our life. May we get it right with thee, that we might be pleasing to you, that you might be glorified. We love you. Thank you. Thank you for all you've done in our life. We want to live it for you. May you be pleased with it. Bless the day. Bless your word. May we go forth with the word, finding a good lodging place, good ground in our heart to bring forth fruits of righteousness, that you'd be pleased. We'd ask these things for your glory, your honor. We'd ask them in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. Humble yourself before the Lord. Call upon him. My people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face. Then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and will heal their land. What precious promises we have for healing in the land. It's on us. It's on us. It's on God's people. It's on God's people. It's on us. Be right with him. Be right with him. I think we have one other song that's left on that sheet. What song is that? All right, the old account was settled. I'm glad for that. Amen. If it's never been taken care of in your life, it can be today through the Lord Jesus Christ. So let's sing that together, and we'll close the service out and have a few announcements for our church before you leave.
On the first, there was a time on earth when in the book of heaven an old account was standing for sin yet unforgiven. My name was at the top and many things below. I went unto the keeper and settled long ago, long ago, long ago. Yes, the old account was settled long ago. And the record's clear today, for he washed my sins away. When the old account was settled long ago. On second, the old account was large and growing every day, for I was always sinning and never tried to pay. But when I looked ahead and saw such pain and woe, I said that I would settle. I settled long ago, long ago. I did. Long ago. I settled it all, yes, the old account was settled long ago. Hallelujah! And the record's clear today, for he washed my sins away. When the old account was settled long ago. Oh, sinner, trust the Lord, be cleansed of all your sin, for thus he hath provided for you to enter in. And then if you should live 100 years below, up there your life regretted, you settled long ago, long ago.
I want to say 74 years ago. 74 years ago. Somebody else tell me how many years ago. It's been 30 years ago. 33 years ago, actually, for me. 33 years ago. 48 years ago, Brother Mike says. 49 years ago, somebody says. Who was that, Brother Kenny? 45 years ago. You weren't saved 45 years ago. You weren't alive yet. Brother Kenny said 45. All right, 45. Amen. I'm glad it's still holding good. It's still holding good. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to shut off these live streams, and I want to talk to you folks for just a second of time. Thank you for being here.